Number 10. Deadly dog attack. In Oklahoma, pit bulls mauled a mother to death while she was house-sitting and looking after a friend's pets. Police identified her as Rebecca McCurdy, mom of 2 young kids. At just 28 years old, with a whole life ahead of her, aggressive animals savaged Rebecca while she was just trying to help a friend. Police discovered Rebecca's body in June 2021 in the garage of her friend's house in Skiatook, a small town near Tulsa. The police discovered several pit bull dogs caged in the garage where her body was, but someone or something had knocked one cage over, and there was obvious evidence of a violent struggle between Rebecca and the animals. Authorities took the dogs into custody and handed them over to animal welfare, while the coroner took Rebecca to the morgue. How could an ordinary house-sitting job have gone so terribly wrong? According to what the homeowner told police, he raises the pit bulls as a hobby and sells them for extra cash. He had gone away for a while and asked Rebecca if she could make sure she fed the dogs and gave them water, while also making sure the house was okay. Nobody knows what exactly happened on the day of her death, but the evidence suggests the pit bulls either smashed out of their cage or Rebecca somehow knocked the thing over. It's an absolute tragedy, and she survived today by her husband and their 2 young kids. Number 9. Dead on the job. In 2017, an intruder fatally shot a 34-year-old man while he was house-sitting in Commerce City, Colorado. He died in what police have called an unexpected gun battle between himself and his wife's new boyfriend. Court documents revealed that Christopher Stockwell took a bullet to the back of his head from the man his wife had replaced him with, Christopher Tony. Yes, they were both named Christopher. The arrest affidavit states Tony went to the home where he knew Stockwell would be, intending to scare him. He was aware Stockwell would be alone while looking after the house for a friend, but his original plan just to scare Stockwell did not go as planned. Something went wrong, and both men started shooting at each other. The police were called when the gunshots started. When they arrived on the scene, they found Stockwell dead in a pool of his blood and a handgun underneath his body. They also discovered that the shot which killed him had come from down the street. It traveled through the wall and struck him in the back of the skull in the strangest fluke kill shot ever. Tony must have escaped outside after the initial shootout, and then he blindly fired at the house and miraculously hit Stockwell. Number 8. Deadly favor for a friend. Brandon D. Wilson was only 19 years old in 2017 when he killed 26-year-old Shanique M. Carter of Camden. The South Jersey woman had been at a house in Woodbury looking after the home of a friend when Brandon turned up and murdered her. Police have since arrested him and charged him with the gruesome attack, but that's hardly any consolation for the devastated family. Shanique was a good person. She had agreed to do a favor for a friend by looking after their home. What nobody had expected, nor could they have possibly anticipated, was that Brandon would break into the house to rob it. Investigators learned Brandon had lived in the house for about a year back in 2015 as a foster child. 1 month before the murder took place, police arrested him for unlawfully trespassing at the same house. The courts found him guilty of trespassing, but released him from jail shortly after that. 2 days later, he showed up at the house and killed the only person he could find there. The killing was especially brutal. At Brandon's trial, prosecutors showed how he had beaten Shanique with a metal bar from some exercise equipment, then stabbed her. He attacked her so fiercely that he dislodged the blade of his knife from its handle, and the coroner found lacerations on her brain. While all this was being said at his trial, Brandon had the audacity to yawn. He ended up getting 54 years in prison. Number 7. Armed and dangerous. In Montgomery County, a house-sitter shot and killed a man with a hammer when he tried to break into a home in 2020. The individual who shot the burglar was house-sitting and armed with a weapon. It happened in the small Texan city of New Caney just before 10 p.m. The man, who had been watching the house, heard banging from around the back and went to investigate. What he found was a stranger wielding a hammer. According to what the house-sitter told deputies, the man with the hammer immediately tried to charge him, intent on clubbing his face. But the house-sitter, whose name authorities have not released for privacy reasons, was quick to react. He pulled his gun out and shot the man right there in the home's backyard before he had closed the distance between them. The suspect died with the hammer just out of reach, his burglary botched before he could even get into the house. Deputies haven't released the name of the victim either, but have confirmed that he was in his 20s. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office also says they have filed no charges against the shooter. Number 6. Zip-tied and robbed. At the beginning of January 2022, two women were house-sitting for their boss when the unimaginable happened. Their boss, a big-time social media influencer who lives in a mansion in Los Angeles, had gone away for a while. The two women had agreed to look after their place, only to find themselves zip-tied by armed intruders who broke into the mansion at 1:30 in the morning. The horrified victims woke up in disbelief, immediately terrified when they saw the three men standing over them with guns in their hands. This is what the police told the New York Post about what happened. The women were then bound with zip ties around their wrists. The intruder took their phones and started ransacking the home. One of them had a handgun, another had a rifle, but luckily they weren't killers. They took what goods they could find and fled, hurting nobody. But they left the women tied up and took their phones. Desperate and terrified, the women realized they could get a hold of the homeowner by ringing her doorbell camera. The homeowner was in New York and saw the alert on her phone when the doorbell rang. When she looked at the video, she saw the two women tied up and screaming, and she phoned the cops. The robbers ended up getting away in a blue sedan, and police haven't caught them yet. We don't know how much loot they got away with. The most important thing is that the women survived the horrifying ordeal without being hurt by the thieves. Number 5. Ransacking the joint. A man was supposed to be house-sitting for a family who had gone out of town. Instead, he ransacked the joint and attacked a police officer. It happened in Portland back in the summer of 2021. The man was foiled when neighbors contacted the homeowner because they saw him tearing the inside of the house apart. The homeowners then contacted the police, who arrived to discover the man having a total mental breakdown. He was ripping the house apart. It wasn't that he was trying to rob the place. He was violently tearing the house apart in a fit of mania. When the police tried to take him into custody, he attacked an officer. They did finally apprehend the man, whom they later identified as Dustin Doling. It became clear once they had him in custody that he'd overdosed on drugs, which had thrown him into a sort of psychosis. He'd been keeping his eye on the house, but at some point had taken illicit substances. These substances made him freak out, which made him look like a burglar, which ultimately ended up with him in a jail cell. Number 4. One lost dog. A man in Sonora, California, had one of his friends look after his house and his dog while he went away in the spring of 2020. When he arrived, his house was still there, but his dog was gone. He was extremely upset with his friend. But here's where things spiraled out of control. According to the Joliet County Sheriff's Office, Michael Amix was the one doing the house sitting. When the owner of the home came back late on a Saturday night, Michael told him that his dog had run away. There was just nothing Michael could do to stop the dog from escaping. The homeowner was angry, but the two sat down anyway and had some beers together. The beer fueled the homeowner's anger until they started arguing again about the lost dog. Now, good and drunk, Michael pulled a handgun from his pants and slammed it on the counter. Then he punched his friend in the face. His friend fought back, busting Michael's mouth open and bruising his face so badly that both his eyes were swollen shut. Michael tried to flee the scene but was in terrible shape, forgetting his handgun and stumbling drunkenly out onto the lawn. The homeowner called the police and told them what happened, and they arrested Michael for battery and brandishing a firearm. Number 3. Party animals. In Buffalo in 2014, a family hired a teenage girl to house sit for a family and look after their cat. But once the family was gone and the girl was by herself in the house, things got out of control. She invited over some friends. A wild party broke out, and when the family came back home, they found their house covered in pools of urine and vomit. The family was livid. Stephen Binder said the teenage girl and her friends trashed his home, leaving barf, urine, and even feces all over the place. They also stole over $6,000 in cash and every piece of jewelry in the house. In response, the teen's parents wrote a check for $90 to Stephen, the exact amount he had originally paid their daughter to keep the house safe. According to the police, at least 50 people had shown up at the Binder home and left it decimated. What's crazy though is that the high school girl got herself a lawyer. The lawyer claimed it wasn't her fault the partygoers destroyed the house. The lawyer said the family told the teenager it was okay if she had friends over. And after she had invited a few friends to hang out, it got out of hand, and there was nothing she could do to stop the destruction. The lawyer also said that the teen was a victim herself of untrustworthy friends. Either way, the teenage girl protected herself from prosecution with the help of a lawyer. All the while, the family had trusted her with their home and was out thousands of dollars and had to scrub human waste out of their carpets. Number 2. Substitute house robbers. A couple of homeowners in San Rafael had to go out of town and leave their house empty from between the middle of October to the middle of November in 2019. They hired a woman to look after their property while they were away. But while the woman was looking after their house, she had a family emergency that required her to be out of the area for a while. She passed the job of looking after the house on to Violet Bloomfeld and Casey Dial. You can probably see where this is going from a mile away. These substitute house sitters did not take the job seriously. They treated the house like their own personal paradise and stole every bit of loot they could get their hands on. Jewelry, clothing, electronics, and anything that looked valuable. When the homeowners got back on November 24th, they found $22,000 worth of their personal property missing. It's hard to imagine what these thieves were thinking. After the homeowners reached out to their original house sitter, she could put the pieces together pretty quickly. She gave the cops the names of the people she had passed the job over to. Police arrested Violet and Casey and charged them with suspicion of identity theft, possession of stolen property, and grand theft. Number 1. Arrested in Wisconsin. In the small city of Monona, Wisconsin, Keontae Furge and his friend had just moved into a house of their high school football coach's mother. It was 2020, and Keontae was only 23 years old. Because the coach's mom had passed away recently, the house was going to be empty for 2 months. The coach said Keontae and his friend could stay there if they didn't mind looking after the place. On June 2nd, just before 11 a.m., a woman looked across from her own house and saw a young black man sitting on the front patio. She immediately grabbed her phone and called the police. She didn't know the circumstances or why Keontae had moved into the place, but it was clear he wasn't up to anything. He was just sitting on the porch and enjoying a nice day. When the cops showed up, Keontae was back in the house. Officer Jared Weddick arrived, followed by Officer Luke Wunsch. They entered the home together without knocking, without announcing who they were, without phoning the owner of the home, and without getting a warrant. All they did was barge into the house with their guns drawn, screaming like a bunch of mental patients. Police cuffed Keontae but did not arrest him. By the time the first 2 officers on the scene had apprehended the innocent man, other officers had done their due diligence. They had learned the rest of the story and found out Keontae was in the house with permission. The police released him and apologized. But that wasn't the end. He's now suing the city. Keontae says it's not about the money. It's about making sure any man or woman can move into a house in the city of Monona and sit on their front porch without fear the police will break in and kill them. Would you rather that your house sitter lost your dog or had a wild party and trashed the place? Let me know in the comment section, and thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to help support the channel, and I'll see you again soon for another unbelievable video.